Hello, it is I, Funk McLovin. I have not let Janiyah or Bucky into the room yet. We'll get into the revisions in a second, but first, I want to do my due diligence and provide a recap of the acts that we're actually covering today, which are Acts 1 through 3. What I'm about to read is not our revision, but what happens in the comic itself. Act 1 begins with an introduction of the series' main character, John Egbert, with the famous phrase, "A young man stands in his bedroom." It just so happens that today, the 13th of April, 2009, is this young man's birthday. Act 1 is somewhat meandering, but broadly it follows John on his quest to retrieve a package from the mailbox while avoiding his overbearing father. Mixed in are a variety of allusions to adventure games, such as the narration style and inventory system, which are dropped much later in the comic. John obtains his gifts and decides to begin playing a game called Sburb with his friend Rose. Act 2 covers John's plight to enter the game, unleashing his kernel, struggling with Rose's spotty internet, and entering the game world to avoid a deadly meteor hurtling towards John's home. Rose is also heavily characterized, being on the other end of John's game-related shenanigans, as well as Dave and Jade, the latter of whom is merely teased. Upon entering the game world, known as the Medium, John hears a voice in his head that is revealed to be a being known as the Wayward Vagabond who is guiding him on his quest from a post-apocalyptic Earth through time. John's Nana is also revived using Sburb magic and becomes John's guide on his quest, explaining that the Earth is doomed and his quest is far greater than the saving of their planet. During Act 3, Jade is revealed to the reader as an oracle of sorts. She dreams of a golden city and a planet with clouds tell her the future. In the real world, she lives on an island in the Pacific. Meanwhile, Rose, on her quest for better internet, finds a lab in the basement of her dead cat's grave and works to get the game herself. In this basement, she learns that Earth is under attack by an apocalyptic meteor storm. Dave vies with his brother to obtain his copy of Sburb to enter the game, and gets his ass kicked. That's all there really is to say on the matter. The Wayward Vagabond also meets up with the two other cohorts, named the Peregrine Mendicant and the Aimless Renegade, who collectively have a quest to facilitate the kids on their own adventures. The Trolls are teased as a group of internet dwellers who collectively rag on the main four. Also important, the main four have guardians who have also made it into the game, namely John's father, who has a run-in with a fellow who loves knives on a purple planet named Durst. The act ends with Dave installing the game and John entering his first gate to start on his quest. Essentially, these three acts set the stage and set the main conflict into motion. They establish the four main characters, the plight of the Carapatians, and the goal, to reach Skaia and to make a new universe. With that refresher out of the way, here are Janiyah and Bucky. Let's get rewriting. Hello everybody, welcome back. This is the second time I've said that because we actually did record this episode of the podcast earlier, and there were some technical difficulties, which, happen.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We're gonna still bring you this episode, and sometimes when you forget to hit export on the old Audacity file, you get another chance to sort of do the podcast again, so it's not all bad.
Yeah.
Doesn't Audacity steal your data now?
It does steal, or it can steal your data. I don't use Audacity. I use Audition, but
okay.
It doesn't matter if you accidentally don't save your file, what program you're in.
Right. Well, this episode is sponsored by Audacity. Just kidding.
Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
True. All right. So,
but it could be.
It could be. Audacity, if you're out there, I
Hey,
will stop talking talking bad about you for money. So you guys just heard the listeners, that is, just heard the summary that I recorded separately. You guys did not,
Right.
so you guys are gonna have to be in the dark. You guys read Homestuck though, right?
What's Homestuck?
What is Homestuck? That's a good question. It's like a philosophical question.
Yeah. A miserable pile of secrets. Yeah.
Yes. Damn. snatched the joke out of Bucky's
only
mouth.
Joke.
What is X? A miserable pile of Y.
Right.
With that out of the way, that order of business, whatever that was, there's we can talk again about rewriting Homestuck in this episode, Acts 1 through 3, which has just been summarized for the viewer's convenience. Now, having talked about this already, I had some notes from our last outing, and most of it is pretty standard stuff. But broadly speaking, we did like the structure of Acts 1 through 3.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like a slow unraveling of what Sburb is actually about, with very concrete goals for the kids along the way, like getting inside the game and such. To start off, last time, we talked about how each of the characters, the main four and sort of their parents, would change based on the things that we talked about in episode 1. So let's just go through that again. We started off with John. How is John different than his actual Homestuck counterpart? A little reminder from last episode. We did age up the characters and changed a little bit about their sort of circumstances. In my notes, I have John Egg, which, of course, is egg in the trans sense. So,
right. Yeah, I know.
You guys can expound.
I know. I'd mentioned. I think, I like the idea of having John come out as June during that 3-year period on the spaceship, and I think that it would be good to start to set some of that up in the beginning, because we have the benefit of doing this all as one, laid out thing rather than having it be iterative, which means we can foreshadow stuff that wouldn't have even been on the mind of the original creator, since we have a goal in mind there, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities to put, gender shit in there.
Yeah, and we don't have to, save the gender shit all for John/June, of course. However, the beta kid with the most gender shit, I would argue, is, in this instance, John/June.
Yeah.
So yeah, little foreshadowings of John being a trans person. A lot of, we can sort of, Janai and I have packed in many of those egg moments that kind of make you feel both validated and sort of cringe at yourself. Those classic things.
Yeah.
So again, she's aged up, which makes things a lot less awkward when shipping happens.
Yeah.
And then just someone who is on the cusp of realizing something. So someone who says shit like, "Don't be silly, Dave. Every man wants to secretly be a woman."
Right.
Normal boy things. Not wanting to be a boy. Relatable boy things.
Relatable boy things. Not wanting to be a boy. Crying. Wondering what it feels like to wear a dress.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities that you can use, and using visual storytelling as well. I believe the presumption we're working under is that we're kind of keeping the art the same. This is a writing thing,
this is
an art
strictly story-based rewrite, nothing about the art. I don't have a problem with the art whatsoever. The art is value neutral to me.
Yeah. You might have to make some slight adjustments for the ages of the characters for Euro mode stuff, but
didn't we say John should get a shitty mustache, one of those shitty trans mustaches?
Yes, we did say that.
Overcompensating.
Yeah. I'm
so
manly,
good.
See?
I'm manly, see? I've got some stray hairs on my upper lip.
I made the comment last time, and I feel like this needs to be preserved for the record, that I, prior to coming out as a trans woman, had the the worst facial hair ever.
Just a big old bush.
Horrible. Yeah, it was horrible.
I also wrote down, Dad is manly, but June does not like that, which I think is pretty good. Like, because as we remember, Dad Egbert leaves around those cards and notes about, like, I'm so proud of you, son. Shit.
Yeah.
And June might
react
in a way that is negative, but not really understand why, which is also a trans experience, I think.
Right, like, it's not like he's setting out to be malicious, it's just he doesn't understand that it's fucking with her a little bit, and John also doesn't know why it's fucking with her a little bit.
Right, she doesn't get it yet.
Yeah.
Which is, it gives you an opportunity to, like, loop back to that when you do have her coming out later in the story, because, like, I don't know, we'll get to it when we get to the meteor / ship stuff, but, like, that time period definitely gives you, like, in Homestuck, it gave you some breathing room. It's just that I feel like we can make more productive use of that breathing room than the original comic did.
Yeah.
So.
And I really do like that. Plus, I think we also mentioned something about, like, there's a word for when you misgender someone, but it becomes retroactively the right gender. I don't remember what it is, but it would happen to June where she gets to her planet maybe, and all the salamanders, like, call her a girl, and she's like, I'm not a girl, what the fuck? Oh, I remember. We said that when she got here, she, like, never wears her stuff because for some reason my god tier pajamas was like a dress. I don't get that. That's so weird. Haha. I mean, it looks nice. Haha. Just totally
nervous laughter.
Yeah. That I think, moreover than, you know, indulging in the trans stuff, which is fine. Yeah. I think it does thematically fit John / June to have some kind of arc outside of that, because as it stands in the story, she doesn't really get an arc, like you say, until the ship. Like, she's, you know, sort of a generic sort of character, which there's nothing wrong with, but this would give her something that can fit into that empty space.
Yeah, like, I think I never really... John was not one of my least favorite characters, one of the characters I just kind of didn't care about when I first read the comic. Right. Like, he was just kind of there, despite being such an important character.
Right.
And then, like, starting to write about John and then June and, like, that whole thing made me, like, think a lot more about the character. But, like, I think there's a lot of opportunities to add some additional meat to the story there, rather than just being, you know, they're the protagonist. Like, okay, cool. I'd like to know more about them.
Yeah, I like that. I just like it because June got on. When was that? In 2019?
I think so. I started reading. I read Homestuck, or finished reading Homestuck in 2019, and got into the fandom in 2019. So, like, I think I came in right at. It must have been. It was either early 2019 or like 2018, because I think when I came in, that was already a thing.
Yeah.
At least when I started reading fan content, because I remember being really confused because I wasn't on Homestuck Twitter. But I saw, like, references to June Egbert in fanfic, and I'm like, was this, like, some new character or something? And I, like, eventually figured it out, but, like, that wasn't, the June is canon thing wasn't really widely publicized, so we'll put it like that.
A lot of people, so I like this version of June in the rewrite because of two reasons. One, because, you know, June Egbert, I think, is a great idea and fits, you know, her characterization. And second, for all the people who bitch that, like, well, it's not, you know, June's story isn't about being trans, and, you know, they bitch about that in that vein, this solves that problem where it is intentional now.
Oh, you think you don't believe that we're transgendering? We will simply transgender harder.
Yeah, we're all three of us have a transgenderification beam, and we know how to use it. We were trained in the trans NRA with our transgenderification beam.
A thing that is real, the TRA.
Yes.
Wait, that works.
I was going to say the SRA.
Yeah.
the Socialist Rifle Organization, which is a real thing.
It is
that
a real
sounds
thing.
Awesome.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, they're all over the place. There's a bunch of them in Texas. I mean, for probably obvious reasons.
Well, we shan't pull the curtain back too much on our dirty political views, but I think that's probably obvious by how lovingly we were talking about June Egbert. So,
yeah.
I think that's it. We can talk about for June. There's not really much different characterization except for adding that layer of, I will say, like, gender dysphoria.
Yeah, which, like, I mean, so much of John in the beginning is just, like, introducing the reader to the comic and to, like, the weird game shit. Which, like, I would be in favor of. I think we didn't talk about it in the first episode, but I know we plan to talk about it here, where to, like, maybe dial back some of the game shit just a little bit, like, make it a little more coherent and a little more structured. Like, I don't know. I didn't love all the Siladex stuff. Like, it was fun, and then it got really old really fast. I know some people just fucking love that stuff, and I don't want to take that away from people, but
he liked the Siladex various things.
Yeah,
that's just I don't know. It's fun to an extent. I like some of the Siladex gags because, like, they're nerdy and silly. It's just, like, when it drags on and replaces the plot is when it starts to be a problem. And, like, Acts 1 through 4 relative to the rest of the comic are incredibly short. But that doesn't mean that they aren't still on the longer side. It just means compared to the rest of the comic, they're not long.
Yeah, they are long, but they get dragged down in a way.
Yeah, that's. I don't know. I think that the Sburb stuff is, like, it's obviously important because it comes back, but, like, I would maybe dial down the Siladex, like, fucking around with the Siladex for pages and pages and pages, I guess, is the thing that, like, kind of dragged it down for me. Not the concept necessarily, but just the amount of it.
Yeah, I get that.
Especially because, like, it's obvious that even the author got tired of it when he was like, fuck you, Jade has board games.
Right.
I think it was born of a, like... You know, Hussey loves to fuck around with the audience, and that worked a lot better in Problem Sleuth. And so you see these Problem Sleuthian devices where it's like... Yeah. Even so much as, like, picking something up is a fucking ordeal in this universe. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, I think, retroactively becomes less fun when the story gets going and it's more engaging. And it's like, all right, now this is kind of annoying.
The experience of reading Homestuck on its own and the experience of reading Homestuck as a direct continuation of not the plot but the mechanics and, like, story ideas of Problem Sleuth are fundamentally different experiences. Like, so many gags in Homestuck are, like, the third or fourth iteration of a joke from Problem Sleuth that already ran through a couple iterations, and you're seeing, like, the most refined version, or the most recently refined version in Homestuck.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I feel like as a standalone work, it ends up hurting it. Not in that it's, like, its very existence is bad, but just that, like, it's like Bucky was saying, it's referencing back to things that have been done a couple times before, and if, like, you're coming into it not having read Problem Sleuth, it's like, okay, what the fuck is this shit? And then, like, it also kind of, like, clashes a little bit with what Homestuck turns into. Because Homestuck starts out as, like, I don't know what this is, and then it becomes this very different thing.
I would say even much of that feeling is constrained to these 3 acts, in my opinion.
I agree.
After this, Hussey was like,
a lot.
all right, I got to stop fucking around if I'm going to tell. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, like Bucky said, if you have that later on, then you can't have that stuff from Problem Sleuth. That very much bogs down the later stuff. I'm glad we addressed that. I don't think we addressed that in the original episode. So we'll move on now to Rose. Rose, I think we changed like a medium amount, sort of. The first thing I mentioned was making Mom's and Rose's dynamic more explicit because, excuse me, I got the hiccups. It's a bad time to get the hiccups. Basically, the dynamic that exists in canon is that Rose's mom is like a very earnest person who doesn't really understand either subtlety or irony. And Rose constantly misinterprets her signs of affection because she doesn't feel that she gets the right type of love from her mother. So basically her mom is trying incredibly hard and Rose is like always on edge about it. And that really doesn't come through to the most extent that it could in the comic. So making it clear that Mom, who I don't remember who said, I think it was me who said Roxanne was her name. So having Roxanne more explicitly like giving the parents a little more, I don't know, dialogue or actual things to say instead of just being sort of faceless, nobodies, I think would be good.
Like, I think there's definitely at least 1 or 2 points where Rose says something, like, Mom seems to do something genuine, and then Rose says something to the tune of, like, she's just fucking with you, or something like that, where you're like, exactly. Ma'am? Dude? And, like,
yeah.
Admittedly, that is just how teenagers are. Like, some of the behavior of the beta kids does make sense with the fact that they're 13. But, like, you still get that up until your teenagers leave for college. 18 is still a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one area where, like, the age of the characters and how they're written kind of comes into conflict in the original is that let me see if I can parse this. So one thing that I got is there's this very, like, enigmatic vibe to all of the Guardians. It's like the kids don't understand, like, why their parents act the way they do. The thing about that is a kid way to think, but it's not a 17-year-old or an adult or an 18-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 13-year-old way to think. That's like how, like, a 6-year-old sees their parents, where it's like they have this very, like, I think we did mention this the last time, and I definitely wanted to bring it up again. It's like the way that, like, John has, like, no conception of, like, what his dad does, and, like, Rose has this, like, completely different version of her mom that exists in her mind. It's like that feels like a very young child that's, like, they're too young to understand exactly, like, the nuances of their parents. Like even a 13-year-old, I think, has a pretty good idea of, like, what their parent is about. Like, maybe that they obviously will have distortions and, like, their own biases, but, like, I feel like the way it's presented in Homestuck feels really friggin' weird, and, like, I think it would be interesting to maybe do, like, a more nuanced version of that, where they're now, 18 years old or whatever. I think we'd said 18 because John would be newly turning 18. So yeah, they'd be like 18 and change, 18 and a half-ish. But they have, like, a more nuanced view of, like, they have this disconnect, but it's a disconnect that feels realistic to an 18-year-old, not that feels like a, friggin' first grader, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Losing that enigmatic aspect, I think would be good, because then you can have some more direct. Another thing we talked about was having more connection to the world around them instead of just being in a vacuum. And I think even though the parents do come into the game all to some extent, you could have more conversation with them, so there's more sort of jeopardy with things that are based on Earth. I think Mom especially, because then you could really see her. She could explicitly say something like, wear a coat in case it gets cold, sweetheart. And then Rose is like, that witch, she's totally fucking with me. It's the middle of summer. What does she mean by this? Stuff like that.
It's that scene from Meet the Robinsons where Goob is walking down the hall and everybody's like, hey Goob, what's up? How you doing? You ready for the game? Yes. And Goob's like, they all hated me.
That's so perfect. I don't want to undercut that. Mom, I think, is a bad mom. Like, there's no two ways about it. Like, she is.
Oh yeah.
She does love Rose, much like the Goob thing, but Rose is not getting like nearly enough like parental love.
Yeah, she cares about Rose, but she doesn't have like, she is not equipped to be the kind of parent that Rose needs to thrive. Like, she genuinely cares and she's genuinely trying, but she's not the kind of person that is really compatible with that situation. Also, the Rose overanalyzing the hell out of everything that's very good. Like, that's such a big part of her character as she starts to, especially when you talk about like her interactions with people like Jade, who are much more like straightforward.
Yes.
Which, it's an interesting dynamic.
They don't talk nearly enough.
They really don't.
They need to talk more, in my opinion.
As we get into like introducing Jade, because I know we are just teasing Jade or starting to introduce Jade at this point. But when they start to like interact more, I would absolutely have more like Rose and Jade talking to each other. Because
Rose could even make some comment like, "Oh, Jade, it's so nice to talk to you because you don't have any ulterior motives, unlike every other person in the world who I've ever interacted with." And Jade is like,
no pressure, thanks.
Yeah. Both, no pressure, and, are you okay?
Right.
Rose is like, no, I'm the therapist. Don't worry about it.
Right.
I am the one who psychoanalyzes. Walter White with like black lipstick.
Oh God!
I am the one who analyzes.
Jade, what the fuck are you talking about?
Oh fuck. I also wrote down, I think it was Bucky who brought this up, but Mom using Jake Sr. as like a parental model, which adds more.
Or rather, the inverse of a model. In the sense
yes, exactly. You can expound on that.
Exactly the like extreme opposite of what this man does at all times.
Right. Because from Hive Swap, we know that Roxy was raised by, I call him Jake Sr., that's obviously Jade's grandfather, who has fucked off by this point. But I think that adding those relationships between their actual families is nice, because then you get... they're not really tied together in many ways, other than they just happen to be together in the story. Right. So tying them together in those ways, I think, adds a lot. Plus, it explains a lot of Mom's behavior. If Jake Sr. might have been like this strict sort of disciplinarian who's never around, so Mom compensates by like, being around too much and like smothering her daughter while never giving her anything she actually needs.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good. Like, just building up more of a sense of character in... in Homestuck, like for all of its development of characters, like nominal relationships, and like for all of the dialogue in Homestuck and all the number of characters, there's a lot of times where it feels like the characters are kind of these islands that don't really like meaningfully interact with each other. At least that was the sense that I got reading it. It's like you get these like you do get interactions, obviously, but it always feels like you've just got like a couple of characters interacting. You don't really have not always the feeling of having like this interconnected group of people that all have like lives and thoughts and feelings. It feels very like instanced, where it's like, okay, now we're going to talk about these characters and they get to have like, actual internal lives, and the rest of them just get kind of, put on pause until we get done.
I agree. That reminds me of we discussed how they should be related, and yes. I wrote down something sort of cryptic that I don't understand in retrospect. I wrote down related but unknown, no romance. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, so I do remember what we talked about. So the idea was, I like the sibling relationships. I think we all kind of like that as a possible dynamic, but like have it be so that they are related. They're related through whatever ectobiology bullshit we're going to go with. But in the beginning, there's no romantic tension between any of the related characters. Like Dave and Rose are just friends with each other.
Yeah. We discussed Dave and Rose being like a sibling relationship where
like they have enough
fuck around with each other.
Right, like they have what feels like a sibling relationship because of how they've like connected to each other, and then later on when that is revealed, it's like, rather than it being like this, out of nowhere kind of surprise thing, it's more of like it feels like a narrative completion where it's like, okay, we already have this relationship where we were like siblings, and now we found out we actually are siblings, so that's cool. Like, it kind of, like, closes that narrative circle rather than it just having be this thing that was just, I am willing to bet a lot of money was not thought of at the beginning of the comics. So.
It's like a Luke and Leia situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think one of the other things we said was Rose is explicitly a lesbian, so her interactions with Dave would just be shut down totally. Which, I know she's like bisexual in the comics or whatever, or I don't know if she is or not, but making it explicit that she's a lesbian from the get-go, I think would be good.
Yeah.
Because we have two closeted characters in June and also Dave later on, as we'll discuss. Mm-hmm. And Rose not being in the closet, like, explicitly. She's like, no, I'm 100%, like, women is my thing. Fuck you.
Yeah.
That is like something I would love to have, because just I know this is not a good thing to like think about when you're writing, but I see so much goddamn unsureness about like, what are the characters? Is Dave bi? Is Dave gay? Is Dave XYZ? And making it explicit, I think, would help a lot with
well, I mean, like, one of the things is, like, okay, setting aside, like, weird discourse, when you're dealing...
Thank you. Thank God.
When you're dealing with characters, like, where you want their sexuality to be a thing that matters, it definitely helps to have it be intentional. Like, have it be, this is... Like, if it's gonna matter, then have it actually matter. Where if you're going to talk about it, like, maybe give that some thought first, rather than just kind of stumbling forward. And I mean, like, people are going to interpret things various different ways unless you, like, have the character literally say it, which I don't think is always a good approach. But, like, you can make things clearer or less clear, depending on how you choose to write character interactions.
Yeah, I agree. Now, for Dave, I don't know much about Dave. I don't really connect to him as much as the other characters, so I think you guys mostly took the reins on this one. All I wrote down for Dave himself, I wrote down some stuff for Bro, but for Dave himself, all I wrote down was Dave closeted bi.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of Dave thoughts, but I do like that.
I think he's a cool guy.
Yeah. Well,
literally.
I was going to say, I think we talked about Bro as well as being, like, a little bit more nuanced, where it's less, like, it's less like bro is an abusive evil person, and more of like bro is abusive through this like I'm gonna prepare you for what's coming kind of attitude. Yeah. Like he's, definitely being abusive, but like thinks that he is,
I wrote
thinks
down
that he's doing something good.
I wrote down toxic masculinity man.
Yeah, like
that's all I had.
Like I think I don't remember if I said this in the first episode or in the first recording of the second, but the inherent issue with Dave is a trans guy who's been a guy for a while, as much as I, a transmasculine person, enjoy that headcanon, gets real fucking dicey when you consider how much of a shitty person Bro is, because that means he's either a child abuser but allowed his son to transition, or we are playing into a weird stereotype that I don't like that consists of, oh yeah, trans kids are just being brainwashed by their icky gross parents into being something that they didn't want to be.
Yeah.
Because either like Dave is like, hey, bro, I'm actually a boy, and Bro's like, well, every day I fight you on the rooftop, but it's cool if you're a guy.
Yeah.
Or it's, this baby that I got from a meteor is going to be a boy because I'm raising a boy, and I don't care about their assigned gender at birth. Like, separate from Bro Strider, I think that could be an interesting story, but attached to Bro Strider, I don't like it.
Yeah, runs into, like, a lot of not fantastic things.
It's a story I would only trust trans people with, because that's not something I want to see cis people writing about, and there's a lot that you'd have to consider when writing a story like that, because that one would be a difficult one, and maybe doesn't need to exist.
I was going to say, I think you're getting to the point where you have a story that is so, like, in depth that you kind of can't do it justice in an ensemble cast. Like, that's one of the things about Homestuck is, like, we do have a fairly large cast of characters, which means, like, you are going to have to sacrifice some of the individual character development. So, like the June trans stuff, I think, can work in the context of it, especially because of how June's kind of narrative thread is already woven into the story. But, like, something that complicated, I think, kind of deserves its own story. And, like, you're either going to have it be really half-assed or, like, really insensitive.
Yeah, I get you. With Bro, I think we changed the most about Bro and sort of left Dave as is, but maybe more rattled by Bro's stuff. The idea of Bro trying to make Dave stronger, not explaining why he's doing that, and then that leaving Dave sort of a neurotic wreck, where he's like, I have to be cool, I have to be strong, but in reality, he's just, like, kind of miserable all the time. And when he gets in the game, he doesn't like fighting for that very same reason. Like, he doesn't like being Knight of Time and fighting all these creatures because, that's what he's been doing. So, the very classic, I'm trying to make you stronger, but that totally 100% backfires on Bro.
Right.
Because another thing we mentioned was all the parents, to some degree, know about the game.
Right.
With maybe the exception of Dad, because that niche is filled by Nana later on.
Yeah,
yes,
that's
and
true.
No, because Dad was in communication. Well, his friends went into the game. People on his specific business forum played Sburb. So, like, I don't think that he was unaware of it as a concept. I just don't know the degree to which that he knew about his kid ending up in it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
We should keep that. The Dad's business
forum?
associates. Yeah.
Hype fan
because
that
that is
the most important character in Homestuck.
Exactly. He's the gent of piss. We cannot forget him. He stays the same. He is exactly perfect the way he is.
Every time we talk about that, I just think of our fucking Westworld episode because we made parallels between that character and one of the characters in Westworld.
Nice. That's funny. So, Dave. I think the idea of Dave as... I like what he is in the comic. I think we should just make it more intentional. Like, there are a lot of things we explicitly changed about John and Rose, but I don't really have notes for Dave. I think Dave is probably the best written character in Homestuck.
Yeah. Well,
and I say that that's like not high praise.
I
and maybe
don't think I would agree with that, but like I get where you're going for, but there's a lot of stuff that gets swept under the rug when it comes to Dave.
Dave is one of the most complex and coherent characters that is present in Homestuck, but given that he's undeniably an author self-insert, the degree to which his complexity is explored is lower than the amount of complexity that there is, shall we say.
Right.
Yes. He's the best one because there's nothing about him that, like... there's nothing about him that would have enough meat on its bones to be like bad. So really all you got to do is add the meat on those bones is what I'm saying. If that stupid metaphor makes sense.
And we can like remove the weird, like we can like maybe remove a bunch of the weird like racist bullshit that Andrew Hussey kind of shovels onto Dave. I think that's another thing that I would like to directly say we cannot do.
Yeah, I think that's better to not do that.
Yeah.
I don't know
that was a different time where you could just say that shit and nothing would happen.
No, I think a lot of people thought it was fucked up then too. Homestuck fans have always been known as like not the best for a variety of reasons. But like
that was like
It's the same argument as the Arsler thing. It's like people knew that was fucked up. People were just doing it anyways.
Well, I mean, I've made the point before that the Arsler, like, the character that says the Arsler the most is the narrative. So, like, you know, there's that argument is kind of ridiculous and doesn't hold water, but okay, whatever. Also, like, it was 2009, not like 1960, so like a lot of this stuff
what I mean
was
is,
like
you could say it online. There's like this era of the 90s where it's like people really genuinely believed that like race was over, even though it totally was not.
No, what you mean is that like the core audience thought it was okay to say
exactly
some of this stuff.
You know, Andrew Hussey's Twitter didn't exist to yell at him yet. It was only Tumblr who he could ignore.
It's kind of like it's a very like something awful forum.
Oh yeah,
4chan
very irreverent
kind of vibe to it. Yeah,
where you can just say anything. I think also in that era you could hide behind like, well, I'm not saying it, my characters are, which you can still see Hussey doing to this day.
Yeah,
which is
I feel like that's very disingenuous, but that's definitely a thing you can do.
It's like, I would never say this. I just wrote someone else to say it. It's like, all right.
I just wrote someone else saying it, and
one
is
more
me
N-word
as
exists
the narrator.
Yeah. But yeah, no. I think Sweeper on Hella Jeff can still be a lore point, but maybe not the blog.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you mean Dave's blog where it says the N-word?
that classic
one?
blog. I love how like Andrew Hussey over the years has made a lot of sort of out of I don't know what you'd call like ARG stuff, like lore things that are outside of Homestuck's actual site itself, like Sweeper and Hella Jeff, like Dave's blog, like the whole what was the lore dump that like Calamity Jane came from?
I don't have any idea.
It was like the Sburb.com or something.
Oh, was that the Skynet
systems? Yeah, that's Skynet system.
Fuck.
That horrible. And it's like every time he does, it pisses someone off. Because he doesn't think any of this shit through. Like, the theme of this rewrite has been intentionality, and I think that because Hussey just has zilch.
Yeah, no.
And fixing that is, I think, the most significant change we can make. And then finally, the final character, obviously, in the Beta Kids is Jade. I think Jade was the the most heavy changes. She's still on an island, but we're going to make that actually matter because she is, a person who was raised by like a dog for most of her life.
I think that, yeah.
Continue. I got nothing.
I was gonna say, I think that with Jade, so there's like a little bit of a balance to strike between avoiding some of the like stereotypical type stuff that ends up associated with her character, but also like having her be a character that has more narrative agency going forward. So you have a character who's they're living in a very isolated location, but they have a lot of resources within that location, and is very resourceful, very intelligent, very capable. So like to show that Jade, like, and the comic kind of does this, but like to do even more with that, where it's like Jade is she's a very capable woman, and like that matters in the comic, and then we're gonna not ignore that fact later on and just treat her like a friggin' plot point that then gets discarded. Like, yes. And also again, some of the like goofy, weird, like she acts like she's like a 7-year-old stuff in the comic, where it's like she doesn't understand stuff in a weird way. It's like, okay, I don't know what you're trying to do here, but okay, whatever. I think that having her be sort of like, she's pretty comfortable with this environment that she's in. She's lonely because she wants to be able to see her friends, but she's also like, she's comfortable in the sense that she is capable of living in this environment without having any real difficulty, and she like knows. She kind of has her own set routine and everything, but also she definitely wants to be able to like interact with other people.
I agree. My idea for Jade is she lives away from civilization, but she has all of the amenities. So she's certainly not like, she's doing well for herself on the island, but it is still miserably lonely. And I thought it would be cool because we're having them sort of go to college as a red herring. In other words, they think they're going to college, but they're really going to end up playing Sburb, and the world's going to end. And Jade, I think it would fit to have her. She's the least connected to the Earth as a whole. Like, she probably does not have any friends on the island because no one fucking lives there except Beck.
Right.
And her dead grandpa. But having her be like, oh my god, I cannot wait to go to college. I finally got a boat out of this fucking island. I finally get to see my friends. I finally will like get to see, other people, please, for the love of God. And then, having the rug taken out from under her and being like, oh no, the world's destroyed. There's only 3 people left. And that incredible crushing loneliness is a good theme for her, I think, because that would lead into a more heavy characterization later on. She could be very pissed off about not being able to see the world at all.
Yeah.
What I wrote down is she's a naturalist living on her island, so she like enjoys, cataloging species, and there's lots of jokes about like her having a PhD in nuclear physics, like stuff like that. Her circumstances are mysterious, so in the first 3 acts, no one knows why she has been sequestered on this island or like what her situation is, and it's not really revealed till later. So we can leave that for the later acts, sort of how that is played out. And then I don't remember who suggested this, but I think it's a great idea. it's more explicit details with the Carapacians. Like, she is the one who is connected to Skaia. And she knows that they're going to get into the game. She doesn't really know the scope of it, but she has, like, visions of it.
Yeah.
And she can obviously go around Skaia and talk to the Carapacians and whatnot.
That sounds like something that Bucky suggested. I don't know if it was or not, but that...
Do you remember any specifics?
That feels like a Bucky suggestion.
I do not remember.
Don't worry about it.
That's rough. I think that's a pretty good base for Jade, though. Jade's development mostly comes in later, so I don't want to spoil too much of, like, what is in store for her. But like Janaya said, just the intentionality of not just having her be a plot point after her plot relevance evaporates, and having her be an actual character with things to do.
I know this is like a way later thing, but like, just, you can't lampshade the fact that you don't know what to do with a female character once you've, like, exhausted her utility as a romantic interest or as a plot pusher by saying it's her responsibility to not be relevant anymore. You can't. It doesn't work like that. That really sucked. I don't... Especially
when you have Vriska, who fights tooth and nail against that irrelevance. Kind of feels shitty.
I really did not... I didn't love that. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't like how Jade was treated by the narrative and how she gets super sidelined.
I
know we will.
We'll talk about Vriska too. I'm itching. I'm squirming in my seat to talk about Vriska. I can't wait.
I rub my hands together. The first fanfic I ever wrote was about Vriska, so first Homestuck fanfic. I've written fanfic long before Homestuck existed, so
the Dancestors will also be fun to talk about. Adding some shit to them. Fuck. So, in sum, this is less about the characters and now sort of about the structure of Acts 1 through 3, which is obviously what we're talking about. Which we've called Part 1, sort of the first quadrant of Homestuck, if you will, because splitting it into 4 parts. But Part 1 is about learning Earth will be destroyed, and that changes the narrative pretty significantly from what it's about. Because the focus is not on the Earth, the focus is on these 4 kids. But I think changing the focus to these kids and the Earth at large will add a more realistic or more tragic or more compelling element of where do these kids come from? Where do these kids go? Where do these kids come from? Cotton Eye Joe.
Yeah.
I fucking knew you were gonna do
sort of
that.
Add the context of them existing on Earth,
right?
Because, like, as it stands, we've discussed this, I think, in the first episode. Like, they don't react to Earth dying, their entire fucking planet, and that is, you know, as much as it pains me to say it, you have to explain why Earth matters. Homestuck, in my opinion.
I agree.
And that is just not done.
Not really, no.
So first, what I'll outline is my vision for this is very broadly. You start out with these 4 kids, introducing them and characterizing them, maybe saving Jade for later and sort of keeping her mysterious. Where you're saying, like, all right, we're heading off to college. I can't wait. Ha ha ha. No, I hope this does not become ironic later. And the last hurrah for them before they go to college is playing this new game Sburb together online. And the game becomes important when Rose and June figure out, like, you've got a meteor coming, so you got to get in the game now. And a lot of inadvertent things start happening. They could have other characters that they speak to, like, outside of their friend group. Something I mentioned was, like, more group DMs, because I don't really know why that wouldn't exist in the time period.
Yeah, I agree. Just, like, having stuff that shows more, like, dynamics between the characters, I think, would be really good.
Yeah.
It's, like, I get that maybe it was a narrative strategy to, like, have limited... limited ability for the characters to contact one another, but it really just does not make sense that they don't have group chats. You're right, and it really, I don't know, the convention of like slowly building up to and then revealing these characters in a serial work doesn't translate well to like a finished story. It translates, like it definitely. Having characters be mysterious and then introducing them later is fine, but like a lot of the mystique behind Jade like not knowing who GG was built up by the fact that like you could only talk to her one-on-one, her internet connection was spotty, and like she was very sparing with information and didn't give everybody the same information.
Like an oracle.
Yeah, like an oracle. So, like, you have to figure out where to plonk them in, because I understand why there might not be group chats, but, like, they also would prevent some of the repetitive bullshit that the story does at the beginning, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm just spitballing here, but what if... So, we have... The first page is obviously John's introduction. And whenever I say John, put it in your brain with like quotes, like John quote unquote, as a shorthand for like will be June later. So you introduce John, and then after that you might have, instead of John just talking to one of his friends, you could have like, John, go to your computer and talk to your pals, and then you can have sort of Dave, Jade, and Rose sprinkled in to maybe a larger group chat that you can read the backlog of that talks about like the game and such. So instead of, explicitly setting up these characters, you sprinkle the seeds of that stuff in there while also explaining like what Sburb is and why they want to play it.
Right.
And then you can narrow down that broader cast to just the main four later. I think, to Bucky's point, that gave me an idea of, instead of stringing people along, you could just do the introductions to the first three in like fairly quick succession. Like John can fuck around in his house, and then you show Dave fucking around, and then you show Rose fucking around, in whatever order we choose to do it in. Right. But that's a good idea, being more expedient, especially about the first three, because there's really no necessary reason to have mystique about Rose and Dave, because their situation is very, mundane. They just live in places.
Sorry.
Texas and gone.
I was wrong before. The mystique was building up to the page that people would get to input name suggestions.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
that was a thing.
Right.
Can't forget the context of that the comic was originally driven by reader input.
Ooh, we could use Chad Buskin, aka Dave's original name, as like a character that ends up dying. Chad Buskin, their friend. I do love reading the alternate names of some of these characters.
Yeah, actually, that's a good. You'd have a few possibilities for alternate names that you could have for characters that just end up dying.
Well, yeah.
To sort of make a point about the interconnectivity of the world and like the other people the other people that the kids could know, and just sort of the theming of the original work in general, and also tying in with this idea of that they're going to college now. Homestuck is inherently an American story about American exceptionalism, and one of the traps that it falls into with that is its protagonists are exceptional. And yes, to an extent, if you're telling a story, your protagonist isn't going to be like other people because they're the ones that you're telling the story about. But I think forgetting that these people are people within a world is definitely a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
The individualism of what American capitalist society demands is that every man must be an island, and that I think that is a pressure that's on all the Homestuck characters. They sort of skirt around and they feel this immense pressure, especially as, like, I think that's one of the things that weighs on everybody during the 3-year journey. But, like, nobody ever identifies that the issue is that, like, they were raised in a society that is gone.
Yeah, that's a great point. To the point about Americana as well, I think the work is steeped in, American media, and that I'm an American person, obviously, so I think it's fine to highlight that media, but at the same vein, having the only survivors of an apocalypse be 4 American kids, 3 American kids and like one. I don't even know what to call Jade. She's probably a citizen of America, but she speaks English and they never comment on an accent, so I'm assuming she's American analogous. But having that be something that goes unaddressed is interesting. And by interesting, I mean kind of fucked up. I don't really know how to fix that without significantly changing a lot of Homestuck's themes. It could be that, like, Sburb, because Sburb in the beta universe is just released to the public, so a lot of different people play it. So you could sort of have, like, people playing it all over the world or something, or the implication that their session is not the only one, but maybe I don't really know. What do you guys think? I think that would be
God, even just the goal changing from get through the game to the end of it to get through the game to the end of it because other people playing the game might get spat out in the same place as us, like, fundamentally changes the hopelessness of the entire story. For the better, I think. But, like, they're playing through the game, but, like, there's nobody left. There will never be any other humans other than the humans they already know. They aren't, like, genetically derived from them. And functionally, the human species is, like, dead without incredible intervention. And that sucks? I don't know how much of that was, like, intentional, but it does raise a bunch of, like, existential questions that are hard to grapple with because the human race is extinct. And you just changing that slightly to be the human race might be extinct instead of definitely absolutely is, I think changes the, like, ennui and hopelessness and oh god, what do we do after this is over feeling.
There is a certain absurdist tinge to it where, excuse me, I like to talk about absurdist philosophy where, you have to make your own purpose and that can be as arbitrary as you want. And I think that kind of philosophy does help these kids in the story as it exists now, not necessarily in the rewrite, because we're kind of tenuous on that right now. But in the original story, they push forward because it's like, all right, well, what's left? We might as well fight for it. And I don't want to die, so let's kill Lord English. It's very survival-oriented, but it's also like, a lot of people just do things kind of randomly. Like, Vriska choosing to kill Bec Noir, even though that's a dumb idea, or Tavros raising an army, or all these other plot points that are just, like, very driven by, like, what they want to do as a character. And I do like that interplay a lot. So, keeping, like, an absurdist tinge to it of, like, instead of focusing on the ennui and the existential dread, because that will exist, I think, necessarily in a version of the story which preserves, like, their bonds to other people and the Earth itself, which is gone now. Keeping a more, like, this is morbid and horrible, but we have to press on somehow, and putting more intentionality behind that instead of just ignoring the fact that like the world is gone, I think is the main thing of like...
I feel like the fact that they just kind of like don't really
they never talk about it. It just dies weird. And they're like, okay, cool.
Like I know we brought this up the last time where it's like I would like to see the characters actually have like an actual response to this in some way, like to have some meaningful discussion or like have it inform their way of doing anything literally at all, because it's right. Very strange.
There's one scene I think that Nana explicitly says, no, John, you got to let go of this. The world is gone. Like, you know, you are all that's left. The meteors are done. Like you got to play the game now.
That's not how brains work.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how human beings work. And like, yes. I'm in
the comic, John is like, oh, okay, I'll give up then.
Right, exactly.
And
yeah,
but
it's fine.
in a potential rewrite, you could have him be like, because like he loves those 80s movies, so he could be like,
yeah,
well, there's got to be some way to save the world though. Like we'll scrap together and save it. And Nano has to be like, no, it's gone. Like you saw meteors. Like Rose told you about the meteor map. Like there's nothing. And John like fucking breaks, and the only thing that can save him from that, and again, him is in quotes, of course, because he's only a him for now. But
right,
he gets. The only thing that can save him from that despair, that absolute fucking ennui and crushing existential reality of like, oh, everything is fucking gone now. Like, I can no longer even go to LimeWire to download my favorite songs anymore by Weird Al Yankovic.
2009 references.
The only thing that can save him from that is I have to get my friends in the game. Like, I gotta save some of them.
Well, like one of the things I think is really like interesting as a concept here, and like doesn't really get, I guess, talked about enough, is that like they play this game very unwittingly, and they go in like not knowing what's going to happen, and then the like horror of the realization that it's going to kill everyone, and like they have to get into the game because that's literally all they can do. So like you're saying, where it's like the whole like, well, there's got to be a way I can save people. It's like that's a horrifying scenario. And in Homestuck, it's just like, it's just whatever. It's whatever.
Yeah, yes.
And that feels like, I mean, when you're reading Homestuck, it feels like it fits because it doesn't contrast with the tone of the rest of the comic. But like, if you sit and think about it for a little bit, it's like, holy shit, that's. Wow, yeah, it would be nice to actually have that be a little more of like a thing where they kind of like chew on it a little bit.
And they like, you can still have like your jokes about it to an extent. Like you can still have your Space Odyssey, Red Dwarf. They're dead. They're all dead, Dave. Even this guy, they're all dead, Dave. Even the other guy, they're all dead, Dave. Like you can still have your back and forth joke, but like eventually. Yeah, they're all dead, Dave.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Changing the tone from just sort of whimsical to a more grimsical, sort of macabre. I think that the tone of funny, internet humor, Americana, that's fine. But I think you still do need to give the weight to those things that require weight. Otherwise, as it stands in Homestuck, it's just like, why don't these fucking kids care that their entire planet is gone now? I would care. And
it's just whatever,
And again, that's not even a 13-year-old thing. That's like, that would be like a kid thing. Again, it's just like being not really fully understanding the greater context of the whole world being gone.
Yeah, like a little, like a 6 or 7-year-old thing. Andrew Hussey has no idea how to write children. That's That's what I've said all along.
He like myself was never a child. We were born at the age of 18.
They were never a child, just came into being fully formed. For better or for worse.
In a back alley of some city one day, there was just like a noise, and there we were.
It's a fucking Terminator time travel scenario.
Yeah.
Except instead of like destroying humanity, they just wrote a webcomic.
Are you sure those aren't the same thing?
Shut up. Okay, so here's a little bit of an aside, and I was thinking about it today, and you can feel free to cut this out if you don't feel like it fits the tone of the podcast, but like an example of a story that has characters that are, children and works despite it being a very like eventually pretty grim story is Earthbound. Earthbound does a really good job of like portraying these characters as actual children that are thrust into this like crazy unbelievable scenario. Like the way they're characterized, the way that they're portrayed feels a lot more authentic to like actual kids.
That's a good point. I've only played Mother 3, but I agree in that game. Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get basically the same vibe with that.
To sort of tenuously connect that back to Homestuck.
Yes.
Kids, I think that don't really fucking get along in the same way that they got along at that. Like when you're 13, you don't get along with people as well as the beta kids do.
There's a lot of issues with that.
And I think aging them up to 18 and making them excited to like go to college together gives them that sense of like, all right, we have something to work towards together. And if it's not college, then it's Sburb.
Yeah.
And because the beta kids, what I really fucking love about them is that they never really have a falling out. Through the entire story, they are friends. And I fucking love that. It makes me feel so happy, especially when it's juxtaposed with the alpha kids who have like this massive interpersonal like web of horribleness. To have the beta kids be like this, like, we fucking care about each other so hard, god damn it, energy. I really enjoy that. They have like small arguments, so I'm not going to say they're like, perfect to each other or they hassle each other about things like we discussed in the last in the Lost episode, we'll say. We discussed how like Rose could make fun of Dave for being a closeted bisexual. Mm-hmm. That kind of, teasing is fine, but like for the most part, I think having them be friends, very good friends, is vital. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I agree.
And just again to reiterate, it's cool and sexy when non-straight people make jokes, like intra-community jokes between themselves in their works, and it's bad and uncool when straight people do it. Mm-hmm. I don't know dick or fuck about Andrew Hussey. I don't care, but I'm just gonna say that I think us writing that joke is fundamentally different from 2009 Andrew Hussey writing that joke.
Lol. Yeah, there's also just today as opposed to that time period more because in the environment, a lot of people don't talk about this, but Homestuck was a lot of people's first or one of the first like LGBT friendly works. And that sounds like praise, and it isn't necessarily, because a lot of it seems like, I don't know what to call it. It's because it's not like fetishistic in nature like a lot of this other sort of LGBTQ early stuff was, but it's not necessarily charitable. A lot of it is like tokenism, I guess. Like, there's that famous Hussey thing where it's like, this is gonna make Cora look like fucking evangelical propaganda or something, because you wanted to make it really gay. And I think that spirit is fine. Like, I want to make something gay even though I don't really understand the community. But nowadays we don't need that spirit anymore. We don't need like just some rando being like, all right, I'm gonna give you all the gays I'm gonna write so many token gays. Now we can actually have some meaningful representation.
Yeah, I think that the understanding of like what representation means has evolved, like, because you've got this very like you said, very tokenist approach to like, hey, you've got a gay character now, aren't you happy that you have a gay character?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool, but like it's not written by somebody who has that experience. And like, again, not that it has to be that I don't want to imply that, but like you should be at least mindful of like, if you're going to talk about an experience, that you like do the work required to portray that experience as being like an actual person and not like a stereotype, and not to do like a very special episode where you make it clear that you have at best a surface level understanding of it.
Right.
Because that's not great. Like, again, like the trans stuff, like I think that like, yeah, I want to see more trans characters, but like more than that, I want to see trans authors be given the opportunity to tell stories that meaningfully represent what's going on, and not just like, hey, we got a trans character, you're all good now, right?
Here you go. Here's the trans character that you can enjoy.
June is canon.
Here's your one trans.
Get your food, and get out of here. Go
God.
Take your plate and go.
God.
Yeah.
I don't. It's so disingenuous. It is so disingenuous to say that like any of the overtures that they made were in good faith. Not just June, but any of the characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially, I think the only charitable representation in the entire comic is probably like Kanaya and Rose, and even that becomes, because when you first start out, it's like an earnest relationship between two people, but once that relationship is locked in, they like retroactively become tokenized almost.
Yeah, it's very strange. There's a lot of issues. We can talk about that later.
Yeah. Back on track of the actual story of parts 1 or acts 1 through 3. There is something we didn't mention.
You're talking about the Carapacians, right?
Yes, the Carapacians.
Yes, because I remember we last time we brought this up, I think what we kind of come down on was that the Carapacian story works really well and is really interesting. The one thing that I'd mentioned that I would change, and it's not really a change so much as like a slight restructuring, is I would try to pace the Carapacian stuff a little more evenly and a little more deliberately, like so you have this back and forth between, especially when the game starts and like everything starts popping off, because you have like a back and forth between like you're seeing what's happening in this like the future basically with the Carapacians, and then you go back to what's happening with the game, and like those two can kind of play off of each other, kind of like the bits in Cascade where you see like the different time frames and the different people, and like going back and forth between them in a way that I think is pretty effective. So like I think you can kind of use that same kind of trick, but like over a longer time frame.
Yeah, I agree. You use the word pacing. I think that's really the key word. Like the Carapacians interrupt the story a lot, I think, as a joke, and that is funny, I will say, but I don't think it has a place in the rewrite, just because like I don't like how fucking annoying some of the narrative stuff is. I've said many times before, Homestuck did not need to be that fucking long, and one of the things that contributes to the length is like when something important's about to happen, you cut away to like an unrelated thing that you don't care about as much. And the idea of the Beta Kids being the A plot and the Carapacians being the B plot is fine. I think that works very well.
I think so.
But not having them cut away from the actual A plot in a way that sucks. Like having them, basically what I mean is like, I'm fine having them in A plot. I'm fine cutting away to them sometimes, but having a more traditional sense of, all right, there's a lull in the action. Now I'm going to switch over to the B plot.
It's we keep running into, well, I keep mentioning this. There is a difference between serially writing a comic, an experimental comic, and attempting to construct a story from start to finish, like having all of the information about it in mind. And I think, like, Homestuck is and was an experimental comic in several ways, but there were definitely better ways to plan out the plot of this story.
Yeah.
I agree. I think you hit on something that I want to address, which is, some people who are listening to this might think like, well, what Philistines, these three goofballs, they're trying to fix something that is just earnestly what it is. And a lot of people will talk about like sort of the achievement of writing a long story. And I want to acknowledge, we're not trying to like, we're not saying we're better than Andrew Hussey. We're not saying like we are so much fucking smarter than Andrew Hussey. We're not saying any of that, even though it is true. We are saying
I am.
all we're saying is, Andrew Hussey did not have the advantage of like sitting down and plotting out a whole fucking narrative. Yeah. But we do, so we're going to exercise that right. We're not trying to overshadow Homestuck. Right. We're not trying to erase Homestuck. We're not trying to make Homestuck woke. We're not trying to, like, come for Andrew Hussey or anything. This is a totally independent project of Homestuck itself, trying to improve on its narrative structure in a way that is intentional.
We also have the benefit of having, like... We have the benefit of having the whole of what we're trying to do, and then like that's basically serving as an outline or a draft. So like we're Homestuck as like what it was a webcomic that was posted iteratively. It wasn't like heavily edited or anything like that because it was a webcomic, and like what we're doing is basically taking like that is the first draft, and now we're doing like the rewrite edit pass. Like we have the advantage of like, okay, we've gotten the first draft script from the writer. Now we're gonna take it and we're gonna heavily edit it to make it better. Like that's like every process, like every like novel and movie scripts and all that have the advantage of being able to do that edit pass that Homestuck didn't do, and like. I mean, that's, like, standard for a webcomic. Like, you wouldn't expect a serial webcomic to do that, but, like, there are definitely disadvantages to not being able to do that.
I agree. It's, the biggest thing, I think, is the pitfall that Homestuck 2 fell into is they tried to improve upon Homestuck without really erasing any of the stuff in Homestuck that sucked. So they tried to build upon a shaky foundation. So for this project, instead of building on a shaky foundation by, making fan works or stuff like that, which I don't think is bad, by the way, in and of itself, we can sort of fix the foundation in some way. And fix might be somewhat, I don't know, divisive as a term to use, but I think that's what you need to do to Homestuck because, I don't think that Homestuck is like a morally bad piece of fiction. It's no more or less moral than any other piece of like extended work. It's got some good stuff, it's got some bad stuff, and improving on it is not out of the question because
no,
unlike, like maybe the MCU or some of these other long-form pieces of art, like this was just written by one guy. So he's bound to make a bunch of mistakes. He's bound to make a couple fumbles. And so, we can sort of take Homestuck and say, all right, we don't need to have that anymore because we can make something else.
Well... Yeah, I was reading a couple of things like on Twitter earlier that were talking about like the idea of like, oh, the fans make better content, so just like get the fans to make additional content for your thing, and like the one response to that being like, well, that's not always the best approach, and then some dumbass responding with like, fan fiction is for children.
Yeah,
but the idea like. in order to take a work and like do it justice, you cannot approach it as I just love these characters, so I'm gonna like write the best outcome for them, because like that doesn't necessarily mean the best story. Like there's definitely a place for that kind of like comfort fic. I'm not gonna deny that, but like on one end you have like the comfort fic, and then on the other end you have like the epilogues, where it was like, I'm going to take these characters and just shit all over them and they're going to be miserable. And it's like there's definitely there's a spectrum there, and like hitting somewhere not on either end is probably better. Like you have characters that you do want them to like, you're not taking it and like sanding down all of the like conflict and all of the struggles they have to go through, but you're taking it and making things like, you're making changes that make it a stronger narrative, like things like having John/June have more of an actual character arc and like some development, having Jade be like not sidelined after Cascade in particular, except to be brought back as this like fucking, I know brought back isn't the right term, but to be utilized as the Grimbark like antagonist, and then it's like, Jade, who the fuck is that? Like you can take these characters and use them in ways that are intentional, and you will have conflict, and you will have like things that happen to them that aren't good and stakes, but like to do it in a way that doesn't reinforce like bigotry, doesn't, have an uneven balance of characterization, that has like a more well-paced plot, all that kind of stuff.
I agree. I mean, sometimes sometimes works can be better, and sometimes you can make them better with two of your friends. I also, if someone has a better fucking idea for a Homestuck rewritten project, also, like, please make it. I want to see it. Like, if you think like, oh man, what Philistines these three are for deigning to rewrite Homestuck. I have so much better ideas than they do. Fucking do it, dog. Right. I'm so excited to see it. Please, please. I can't find any fucking Homestuck rewritten, even though it sucks so bad.
It's such a monumental task, and you've got people that are still kind of like going through like the reading Homestuck part, like the Homestuck.
God, Do you ever think about the fact that like every fan of Homestuck has read all of Homestuck?
I mean, not every fan, but
not every fan,
just
but
in general, yes.
There are just so many. Or I used to use an RP website that would get like thousands of people per day, and it's like 1,000 people. Like, it just boggles my mind that like this is a work with so much support behind it. But anyway, I think we've covered all of these 3 acts. If we forgot something, make sure to sort of yell and scream at us at the comments.
Yeah, make lots of comments about how stupid we all are.
Exactly. Don't do that, please. My ego is so sensitive.
I know we didn't. I'm just going through like the setup. Yeah, definitely. We didn't talk about the game FAQs thing.
Oh yeah.
And like that stuff. I think the bottom line we came to with it was that we're gonna keep it. That it's a good thing.
Yes. Oh, I remember. We talked about that in the context of we decided to keep them at the age of 18 in 2009.
Yes.
Because that dated aspect to some of the software was important to the story, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's still important. And like, and we didn't talk about some of the like nitty-gritty of like prototyping and all that, but I feel like that's stuff that we could basically keep the same. Like I'd also stuff like Jade's specifics of exploring on Prospit and all that. Like, I feel like that's all stuff that is fine. Like,
this isn't a super detailed rewrite. Like, it's just a big picture. So if we don't talk about it, assume we're keeping it the same, or we might talk about it later. With Jade's Prospit stuff, I think we will discuss it later because it comes up more later on when they're in the game. Yes. But for now, keeping her as like the Oracle who like knows more than they do. I think in the Lost episode, Bucky talked about how Jade and Rose sort of act as their inverse to their own detriment.
Yeah.
In other words, if you want to cover that, that's fine. I'll probably butcher it if I try.
I really liked Bladekind Eyewear's blog when I was getting into Homestuck and early in the Homestuck fandom, and he had this theory that classes could invert, and I believe the first post was Rose the Witch and the second was Jade the Seer, but basically it argued that the Witch and Seer were inverse classes because Rose starts out the story acting very much in her own self-interest, actively, like, destroying things, and behaves in the way that, Bladekind Eyewear argued a Witch of Void, I believe, could, and, that Jade, acting to, like, gather information across time, especially with those goggles, acted like a seer of time until, like, they had some self-actualization moments and, like, and flipped around to their true aspects, or their true class specs, which Bladekind Eyewear, I don't remember. No, I think that was post-Cascade. I think we saw that. But, that, like, ideas on what inversion means and, like, what pairs are the true pairs, I think, have changed a lot and evolved since then, since we've gotten more information, but, like, the point that I think Optimistic Duelist describes, classes as is, like, when you, it's not just that a character is acting in a specific way, it's how the narrative treats them for acting that way, because they exist in a story that they are somewhat aware of, and where the narrative is embodied by Skaia and seems to have the capacity to make decisions. It's because they exist in that space, having the narrative react to like, if they act selflessly, but the narrative punishes them for it because it's implying that they should act selfishly, that's where the interesting parts of class specting are for me, and that's why I like that Rose and Jade seem to have these parallels.
Yeah, I agree. I like that analysis. This has been our class spec correspondent, Bucky. Thank you.
Thanks.
I do like class specting. I sometimes feel like I like to take class specting out of the context of Homestuck, but in the context of Homestuck, I think it is the most powerful and potent because it can describe, like, why people fucking do anything. It is a tool for characterization, which I really enjoy.
I mean, it's like self-referential within Homestuck. Like, that's the whole. It's designed to explain the work. So
yeah, it's excuse me. Oh my god. I think we have enough for an ep.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we covered everything that was in the last episode, and I'm very glad that I kept notes.
Yeah.
So at the end of this pod, I'm going to have a sort of little reading of what we came up with, basically. A very abridged Homestuck. Because that's what this is, basically. Is Homestuck abridged in the traditional sense, not in, like, the, internet sense. In the sense of, like, we are trying to improve and streamline this narrative and make a version of it that doesn't, require you to set aside, like, 2 weeks of pure reading. Thank you, though. I appreciate you guys coming out, even though you're at your homes. But thank you for coming. Well, next time on this pod, we'll talk about part 2, which is the intermission, Act 4 and Act 5. That'll sort of end out the first half of Homestuck, the other half being Act 6. Make sure to comment and leave stuff, because we to this point we have sort of pre-recorded everything, but after this point we will have some episodes out. So we will be looking at feedback on YouTube, so make sure to leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and all that stuff to sort of keep it relevant
Ring that bell.
The almighty YouTube algorithm needs sacrifices.
We must appease the algorithm.
Yes. But yeah, show this to people who you think are interesting. Share it on, Friendster, on dig.com.
Yep.
That's digg.com.
Yep.
Are those real websites?
Yes.
Yep. Send it to all your LinkedIn sort of profile. Show it to your friends at work.
Please don't post this on LinkedIn.
Who would even? What kind of attention would this get if we posted it on some businessman? Getting a businessman into Homestuck, he'd be like, "I like that John boy's father."
People use their real names on LinkedIn. That's what I'm worried about.
Oh yeah, yeah. You don't want your LinkedIn people.
I'm really hard to find online because there's lots of women named Janaya around.
Yeah. All right. See you clowns later. I'm stopping recording.
Hell yeah. All right. Let me stop recording and save them.